Right. Hey everybody. So now this is a new talk and I'm not precisely sure how long it's going to run, but if my estimations are correct, we should have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. Yay, more people come in, please, come in, have a seat. That said, we'll be talking about your stories. And if there's two things that I know about authors, they love to talk about their stories, and they have a difficult time saying it quickly. So, sadly, we don't have time for that. So, when we get to the Q&A section, please try to be concise. Put a little extra effort into telling us just what we need to know so that you can ask a question. Otherwise, I'm going to have to just cut you off and go to somebody else. All right? That's it. I'm Greg Luderman. I've published 5 novels. I've got a 6th one coming out any day now. I've published various short stories. I've edited an anthology, and I've got the only book that's ever won all 3 of the fandom's literary awards. Woo. I guess the Leo isn't going to continue, so I guess I get to keep that. Sorry. Maybe somebody will add a 3rd award somewhere else, I don't know. Anyway, I go to Furry cons throughout the eastern states, and I sell my books at the dealer's room. And I give talks like this one on how to be a better writer. So if you've gone to any of my talks before, then you should already know the most common error that furry writers make in their stories. So what is it? What is the most common mistake that furry writers make?
Not writing in the first place.
Not writing in the first place? Well, then you're not a furry writer. Most common mistake furry writers make. Anybody know? That's all right, I'll tell you. It's starting your book poorly. All right? With that said, I don't want anyone to ever tell me, I want to write this story, but I don't know a great start for my book. All right? That's okay. Figuring out the great start for your book is in the editing process. All right? It's not only perfectly okay for you to not know the right start for your story, it's perfectly natural for you to work this out after you've completed your entire draft. All right. I thought you were asking a question, but I guess you're adjusting a camera. All right. So, here's a question that I hope will be an easy one. Why are your book's first few paragraphs the most important paragraphs in your entire book?
It's the hook.
The hook. The hook.
It's just the same reason that tabloids or newspaper articles always have the headline, then a block of text summarizing then the whole thing. Basically, the most amount of people will read the headline, then as you go further along, we'll get constant drop-off.
We're so close. We're so close to having it. That's all right. That's all right. Let's back up a bit. You got a guess?
I was going to say, in a fictional setting, it tells you the world or...
No, it's absolutely not. No. All right, so let's back up a bit. Suppose you're in Barnes & Nobles or Books A Million or hopefully our dealer's room, and you're walking down the aisle, and you see... Come up here and please.
Price is right.
Please. Yes, please. And you see a book. Not my book. My book's cover. All right? My book's cover serves only one purpose. Can you guess what that is? What is the purpose of the book cover? Catch your eye, get your attention. Almost. Oh, so close. It's to intrigue you. It's to entice you to walk over, reach out, and take it up off the shelf. All right? If you were going to walk by my table, but instead you stopped and you thought, hey, that's a dragon sitting in the dark. I've seen dragons burning villages or sitting on a pile of gold or fighting with a knight, but sitting in the dark's a new one. I wonder what's up with that. So if you stopped and you reached out and you grabbed the book, then the book cover did its job. That's its only purpose, is to make you grab the book. All right? Your book cover is like a shiny sports car in front of the dealership. It's there to make you slow down and pull over and take a closer look. If I thought I could get away with two furries boning on the cover, even if it had nothing to do with the story, I would probably do it. All right? Because your book cover exists only to make people pick up the book. All right. Now, you picked up the book. Typically, what do you do next?
Open it and take the back.
Usually you turn it over so they can see the back. It's not to summarize the story. The blurb is on the back. What is the blurb for? What is the purpose of your blurb?
Get them to buy it.
To get them to buy it. It's a very good guess. It is to get them to open the book. Your blurb's only purpose is to get them, it is advertising. It is to get them to open the book. All right? And open it up to like, hold it open to the first few pages. There we go. And that brings us to back to those first few paragraphs. All right? So we're at the first few paragraphs. What is the purpose of the first few paragraphs? Because it was already said over here. It's to get you to buy the book. The common theory is that people will give you 500 words, which is about 2 paperback pages, to decide whether or not they're going to buy the book. But that's going to vary. If you are in a comfortable bookstore and you've got a nice comfortable chair and there's nobody pushing at you to go shirt shopping, then you're probably going to read more. But if you are here in the dealer's room where there's things going around in every direction, then you're not going to give it 2 pages. Nobody ever comes and looks at a book and reads 2 pages. Your first couple paragraphs are the best hope you have to sell your book. All right? All right. And please note, if you have already published your story and those first couple paragraphs aren't amazing, that doesn't mean your story is bad. All right? It just means that some people who might have bought your story might have given up on it before they got to the good parts. I own copies of lots of great stories with bad openings. But to increase your chance of anyone buying the story, that's why we need the opening paragraphs to be amazing, right? And while we're talking about bits of your book having only one purpose, does anybody know what the last few paragraphs of your book are for? They only serve one purpose. What is the purpose of your last few paragraphs?
Make them want to buy the next book.
Exactly! On the first try. Your last few paragraphs sell the next book. If
It's standalone.
it doesn't have to be the next book in the series. It just has to be the next book from you. If you tell a great story, if I enjoy your book, and the last few paragraphs feel like a payoff for doing the work of reading the book, then I'm going to buy your next book. I mean, I'll go to a con and pick it up and look through it and pretend that I'm considering it, but I'm going to buy the book. All right? So, I did a completely biased survey of 50 fandom published novels, in my basement and on my Kindle account. Well, I've excluded my own books, but I didn't grab these stories at random. These are books that I've got, so if it's going to be skewed from the normal. If I read a book that's good, I'm going to buy other books from the same author. If the opening paragraphs are terrible, or if it appears to be about something that I'm not into, then I probably wouldn't have a copy of it at all. So I did a survey of these 50 books, and I looked at the opening paragraphs of each. And how many of those 50 do you think had an opening that I could safely say, yeah, that's a good opening? 20, it's a good guess. Other guesses? 35, I wish that was true. It was 12, you were very close, 15. The 12 out of 50, that's less than a quarter. I also marked 4 of those 50 as moderate. I didn't think that they were terribly good, but it seems like maybe somebody else would have. Anyway, that leaves, how many does that leave? 34? 34 that had 4 stars. That's 2/3 of all of those 50 books. And these 50 books weren't just random. These are 50 books that I liked or had a chance of liking. So when I decided to do this talk, I thought I'd read some of the good openers and read some of the bad openers, but not only does that seem a little mean-spirited, we're going to do that. I thought that it wouldn't be really fair, because it's really not that these openers, these bad openers, were written poorly. It's just that they didn't contain anything that was exciting or intriguing or funny that's going to cause me to buy the book without reading it. All right? So instead, I'm going to do just what you said. I'm going to read a few good ones, and I'm going to give you some general categories of where these bad ones went wrong. All right? So let's start with a good one. As soon as I get some tequila. All right. It can hardly be a coincidence that no language on earth has ever produced the expression, as pretty as an airport. Airports are ugly. Some are very ugly. Some attain a degree of ugliness that can only be the result of special effort. 4 sentences in, and Douglas Adams sold me that book. That's what we want to accomplish, all right? Now, admittedly, Adams was a tremendously funny guy, and most of us can't hope to ever be that great. But I think that you can see that the opening, if you're only going to read a few paragraphs of a book and make your decision on whether you're going to buy, that's a great one. I want people reading those paragraphs, right? Of the 34 books that I felt had a bad opening, 6 of them had some sort of introduction. All right? Either they had a chapter labeled introduction, or they started out their first chapter with the author explaining something about the setting. After the humans killed themselves off, the world was quiet for many years before the animals arose to replace them, or something like that. Please don't do this. Go ahead and write an introduction if it'll make you happy, and then in the editing process, I want you to cut it out and throw it away. Your readers don't want an introduction. Show, don't tell. They don't want you to explain why the world is the way it is. They want to discover it. Alright? Alright. A good book is like a roller coaster where something strange and inexplicable happens, and then shortly thereafter, we piece it together and think, oh, that's why they did this, or that's why they didn't do that. That's the thrill and the game. That's what we want to accomplish. All right. Besides, lots of readers skip over all of your book's front matter. Your copyright, accolades, dedication, table of contents, about the author, acknowledgments, prologue, and introduction. They page through it all, look for chapter 1, and start reading. All right? All that's going to be wasted. Some of your readers will know it, and some of your readers won't. And if you're depending on that, then that's screwed up. So, I want you to get into the habit. No introduction. Make chapter 1 kind of short, where intriguing and exciting things happen, and we pretend the reader knows what's going on, even though they couldn't possibly. All right? Don't explain anything. All right? Instead, dribble your explanations out a little at a time over chapters 2 through 4. All right? Let's have another good start. The angel was cleaning out his closets when the call came. Halos and moonbeams were sorted into piles according to brightness. Satchels of wrath and scabbards of lightning hung on hooks, waiting to be dusted. A wineskin of glory had leaked in the corner, and the angel blotted at it with a wad of fabric. Each time he turned the cloth, a muted chorus, as if he had clamped down, a muted chorus rang from the closet, as if he had clamped down on the lid of a pickle jar full of Hallelujah chorus. That's charming. I know nothing of the setting. I don't even know the character's name, but I want to read on. That's what we want to accomplish on our opening paragraphs. Of those 34 books whose openings I felt were poor, 4 of them began with a description of the setting. We readers like good, vivid descriptions in a book, but I don't care how good your descriptions are, they're not going to convince me to buy the book, right? Descriptions shouldn't be in your opening paragraphs at all. And as little description as you can get away with should be in chapter 1. Save that for chapter 2. Good year. All right. One more great start for you to enjoy. I'm pretty much fucked. That's my considered opinion. Fucked. 6 days into what should be the greatest month of my life, and it's turned into a nightmare. Yeah, something awful has happened, and now we're playing catch up, so strap me in, I'm ready. That's a great start. Back to those 34 books with poor openings. 3 of them started with a speech. Either a character giving a speech, or a longish, famous quote, or maybe a quote from a fictional character that exists in this setting. One of the 3 even started with a Bible quote. A large segment of our fandom feels persecuted by Christian fundamentalists. So, don't even get me started on why Megaplex has to be 18 and older. It's a terrible idea to have Bible quotes in your furry fiction. And starting off chapter 1, that's just a terrible idea. But aside from that, people don't like speeches. Well, when was the last time you were like, yay, let's go to a speech? Speeches are the things that we put up with so that we can walk across the stage and get our diploma. Alright, so you're in the editing process. You've reread your first couple paragraphs and they're fine, but they're not exciting. They're not intriguing. They're not funny. They're not like any of those 3 that I've read to you. They don't sell the book. So what do? Well, I've got 3 techniques that I would like you to experiment with. First, there's time shifting. Let's say you're writing a gumshoe detective novel, and your draft starts with a knock at the door, waking your detective up. He's passed out at his desk with an empty whiskey bottle in his hand. He gets up as a beautiful dame walks in, asking him to take her case. Her brother is missing, and despite his hangover, he plays it cool. He tells her it'll cost $25 a day plus expenses. This first chapter is good in the sense that it really sets things up. You know the setting, you know a little bit about what the main character is going to be like and what motivates him. But unless your writing is hilarious, it's bad in that 2 people talking doesn't make a very thrilling scene. Your book needs 2 people talking scenes, but it's not a good choice for chapter 1. We might feel intrigued, wondering what happened to the dame's brother, but our focus is going to be on the main character, that's the detective. He's not feeling a profound sense of loss, so the case isn't personal to him yet. Therefore, it won't be personal to the reader. Right? Now, maybe for the past couple of years, you've been thinking about this book that you're going to write, and you've been imagining that as chapter 1. But it doesn't have to start with the scene that you've been imagining. All right? Something happens before that. Something happens after that. We could shift forward, skip this setup, and jump right into whatever is the first exciting scene of the story. Maybe it's a gunfight, maybe it's a fist fight, maybe it's discovering a dead body. And we don't have to throw away the hangover scene. If that is important, we can always flash back to it. All right? We can also shift backwards to the brother's disappearance. Maybe he's unlocking his front door, opens the front door, and there's somebody sitting there in his easy chair with a gun. See, now that's an exciting first paragraph for your book. Authors might want to resist that. They might think, oh, well, all of these chapters in my book are all written from the detective's point of view, but this is something that the detective didn't see, so I don't want to change that. And that's very valid. I appreciate that you're thinking that. But the truth is that the reader is going to let you bend the rules for chapter 1. And I did that on this book here, my new book. The entire book is written from the author's, from the detective's point of view, except for the first murder in chapter 1. The second technique I want you to consider is the flash forward. It's become really popular in the action movie space without any explanation of why. Deadpool is jumping off of a bridge and into a fight, and people are being killed left and right. And then finally, they pause and he's all, but this is a love story, right? And then he backs up to what would have been chapter 1, and they take a little bit slower and they explain the who's and the whys. Although it seems like every single action movie is doing that these days, you're going to see that in fiction too, and you can use that technique. Yes, that. The final technique is the hardest, but I find it to be the most satisfying. It leads to the most interesting type of story edits. I call it, what's wrong with my world? All right? To do this, you take your draft and you insert a blank chapter 1, so the story that you'd originally planned now begins on chapter 2. For chapter 1, you ask yourself, what is wrong with my world? All right? And by this, I don't mean, how have I screwed it up? I mean that from our modern human perspective, if we were looking at the setting of your book, what is the most jarringly broken thing, even though it's normal to the characters in the story? All right? Think about your story. Think about what is going to be the weirdest thing, the most broken thing from our human perspective. All right? And there should be something. Otherwise, your characters must be living in a utopia, and all they have to do is sit about and enjoy themselves. All right? The broken thing need not, and often will not, have anything to do with your main plot. For example, old people are considered a burden, so everyone is expected to commit suicide at 60. I've used that one. Prey species are second-class citizens to predator species. It's like the beginning of Zootopia. Predator species are second-class citizens to prey species. It's the end of Zootopia. It's taboo for humans and furries to fall in love. It's a classic. The government has banned all rebellious media. I've used that one. The elder gods are real and will bestow great power on those who work towards their release. H.P. Lovecraft. And so on. You take that one thing and you write a new chapter 1 with something thrilling or intriguing in the first couple paragraphs. It doesn't have to, and often won't, involve any of your existing characters. But it will illustrate how different this world is from what we expect. It's like having an introduction, but show, don't tell. All right? And then finally, you make edits near the climax of your existing story that will connect and explain your new chapter 1. Now, I realize that was kind of a big bite, so let's take a moment to digest all of that. Let's consider that detective story. But instead of the gorgeous dame hiring him to find her lost brother, now she wants to recover a valuable item that she claims was stolen. And then along the way, the detective realizes that she wants it because it's a crucial artifact that she will need to unleash Cthulhu. Right? This is a good story. This is good stuff. It's been done tons, but you could do it great. All right? So, we insert a chapter before chapter 1, so now the detective is waking up with an empty whiskey bottle in his hand at the start of chapter 2. And we write a new chapter 1 where cultists are trying to summon Cthulhu, but one of the many things that had to be perfect goes wrong, and the ceremony fails. And we start right as the shit is about to hit the fan. All right? The high priest is finishing his incantations when he suddenly realizes that the dagger he used to sacrifice the virgin is a forgery. A bit of gold flakes off the blade, and he says, hang on, that doesn't look right. And then through the shimmering portal, the creature that's going to come through the shimmering portal is not about to grant him eternal life. It's all teeth and claws, and then blood and gore and death. All right? Now that is an opening for your book. It's exciting and intriguing, and it sets things up. All right? Finally, we're going to edit your existing story so that Gorgeous Dame isn't trying to recover a golden dagger. She was trying to recover an onyx box. And when the detective finally gets his hands on it, he opens it up and he sees the golden dagger. And then the reader goes, oh crap, I'd totally forgotten about that in chapter 1. And now we're here at the end of the book, and oh, that's the thing that she needs to destroy the world. All right? And that's how you do it. So, that's the things that I was going to talk about. We still have half an hour left, 28 minutes. But before we open this up for questions, let me remind you for a second time that we have very limited time. If you need to tell me about, or tell us about your story so that you can ask your question, don't go telling everybody about the entire plot of your book. Sum it up quick or we'll have to skip you. So, with all that in mind, who's got questions? Yes, in the back.
It's kind of half of a statement, but to hammer home the point you were making about most people don't read the introduction and all the stuff before the first chapter. If your book is released electronically, like a lot of Kindles and stuff, skip right past all that and go straight to the first chapter anyway.
When you open a Kindle book, it fast forwards you to what it thinks is the first bit of your story. And it could easily zip you past prologues, and they might be missing it, not even know that it was there, not even realize that they skipped past it. Yes.
I may have missed this much, but for the What's Wrong With My World technique you were talking about, how do you, I guess, say, balance between showing that part of the world and not getting into exposition of the world?
Okay. So the question is, how do we give them enough to excite them and make them want to read on, but without explaining so much that we've dawdled and lost their attention in chapter 1? And that's a fair question. It is going to be a balancing act, absolutely. And this is, of course, where beta readers and editors are going to come in and tell you, hey, you've got too much here or you've got too little. But a good plan is to remove as much as you possibly can and then read it again and see if it confuses people. It should confuse people a little bit. They should be wondering. Most modern books, especially science fiction, intentionally start with an expectation that you're going to be confused. But modern readers have grown to accept that, and we're not going to throw up our hands on the first sentence of, well, I don't know what a thingamajiggy is. We will give you a little bit of time. If it's a short chapter 1, you can get away with a lot of shit. Use as little as you absolutely have to. Enough description to make the readers happy, but as little as you could possibly get away with. And there's no real magic apart from just kind of experimenting, trying it over and over again until you get the right balance of just enough. All right? Other questions? Yes?
Yeah, I wanted to hear your opinion on using senses to kind of pull in the audience.
So senses, so now we're talking about description. And descriptions are great, but again, chapter 1, go as limited as you can. We want intrigue, we want excitement, and we want humor in your first chapter. Save the description and the senses and the slow burn of getting readers really, really into being the character for chapter 2, because our focus is on selling the book here in chapter 1. All right? Other questions? If you guys have run out, then I'm going to end this early. Oh, what do you got?
How do you feel about multi-parted or multi-tiered setups? Like, you introduce the first character right at the off in dire straits, and then right after you cut to another part in the same area, technically, of a character that's a bit more intimidating. You're not sure of their intentions, they're left purposely vague, and you're left thinking, well, shit, this person's in dire straits, and this other guy really isn't far off, they're gonna make it.
Interesting. Usually when we do 2 competing threads throughout a story, we're alternating by chapters. But you're talking about doing them even closer,
Yeah,
so
well,
like
this is like a short story.
sub chapter size. That's an interesting thought. If your bits are short enough, you could totally do that. But whatever is going to be the first bit, again, that's what you're focusing on for the purpose of selling the book. That has to be exciting. So definitely you want to start with the in dire straits first.
Like, this year there's not going to be much humor.
And then you want to cut to. So you can totally swap between 2 characters. You're going to do that in the bigger form. Almost every book these days seems like is got at least 2 main threads that we're switching back and forth between. So I don't think any of that's a surprise. But how fast you're switching back and forth,
And
that's going to be harder to tell. Usually it's like as you get closer and closer to the climax, and the bits get shorter and shorter, and we're like, oh god, there it is. But the beginning of your book is a bit like your climax in that we're trying to be as exciting and as intriguing as possible. So I think it's a valid thing to try. I've never tried it, but I don't see why it wouldn't work. Anything else in the back?
So a lot of stories I read use dialogue as like a vehicle for exposition. Do you have any recommendations for avoiding that, or just generally fitting?
See, I don't, because I'm big on dialogue. Most of my stories are very, very dialogue heavy. I'm going to advocate for dialogue over narration any day. So I don't think I'd be the right source for that. Use dialogue. Dialogue is hard for a lot of authors. A lot of authors have a very hard time writing dialogue that feels natural. When people read it, they're like, people don't talk like this. And that is hard. One thing that I find helps is reading your stuff out loud. Not just pretending like I'm reading it over and I'm moving my mouth, but you're actually reading it out loud. Go into your basement or go someplace quiet or go out wherever and actually read the stuff out loud. And when you read dialogue out loud, when it actually hits your ear, you'll be much more likely to go, yeah, I don't think people talk like that. And go ahead and make the change, back up, read it out loud again. Dialogue is great. Put as much dialogue in as possible.
All right, sorry, second question. So what are your thoughts on first, second, and third person perspectives?
Oh, I like this question. First, second, and third part. I'm like an evangelist on this one. Second person, not even an option for narration. Please, 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 please stop using second person narration. Yes, you do want an intimate connection to the reader, but please stop saying, and then you do this and you do that. And let's not talk to the reader, let's just talk out loud and the reader listen. So really your choices, I think, are between first and third. I'm a big fan of first person. I love first person stories, but not everybody does. If you write first person narration, you are going to lose some readers. That's just, that's a sad truth. But yeah, sometimes it does feel like fan fiction. When I wrote my erotica novel, I was really torn between first and third because, like I said, a lot of people will pick up a book and go, oh, it's first person, I don't read that. And so I actually wrote the start of the book in first person, and I wrote the start of the book in third person, and I compared them. I'm not afraid to write too much and then throw shit away. When I rewrite a book, I take my previous version of the book and I put it on the right side of the screen and I put a blank document on the left side and I retype the whole book. So I'm not afraid to write something and throw it away. I'll do experiments, I'll do a 10,000 word experiment and go, nah, that's not going where I want it, I'll throw the whole thing away. It's okay to try. I tried a first person and I tried a third person, and I found that in this particular case, first person worked, third person was not intimate enough, especially with an erotica, where you really want the reader to be in the character's shoes. First person works great. But know that you are making a trade-off. And then third person is used in the majority of fiction, third person narration. It's a good, strong option. There you really have two options in third person. You've got the third person limited, and you've got the third person omnipotent. Third person limited is basically writing a first person story, but you're saying he and she and they and them, and you're writing it with all of the pronouns that you would in a third person story, but you're only showing it from one person's point of view. Like I did with this detective novel, it's all from the detective's point of view. That makes it a third person limited story. Third person omniscient is where we're allowed to see into different characters' minds. And while I'm on the soapbox, I'm going to speak about this briefly. A lot of people think that, oh, well, I'm writing in third person omniscient, I can show what is in anybody's mind. No. Third person omniscient means that each scene could be narrated by any character, but once you choose one, stick with it. All right? Each scene, new chapter, starting a new scene. If you've got a scene break, like a pound, 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 or a little graphic or some space or something to say, hey, this is a new scene, this is a time where you could choose a different narrator. But other than that, choose your narrator, write your scene, and only look into the mind of that one character. That's your third person omniscient. The fact that you're able to choose multiple characters overall is what makes that. Yes?
Just to add on to that, the Expand series of novels, he really goes all the way with that. Every chapter is narrated pretty much by alternating different characters.
Yeah. One of the things that I like to do when I'm writing third person omniscient is when I start to write a scene, I make a conscious choice. I don't just start writing. I decide who is writing this scene, and then I make sure that the first name that gets mentioned in the scene is that character's name. That helps drive it to the reader of, oh, okay, this is probably being narrated by them. And then I show something that the reader, that the other characters couldn't possibly see. I either show something that that one character is thinking or feeling, or something else that's invisible to drive it home and say, oh, okay, this is the narrator character. And I do that at each scene, just to make it super clear to the readers what's going on. Yes.
So a bit of advice I got a while ago, and I'm curious about your opinion on it, is to, as quickly as possible, demonstrate or say the problem that the main character is dealing with, like the thing that they're going to have to overcome to actually like succeed in the story.
That's a tough one, actually. So he's saying that how quick do you get to the point of this is the main battle, or this is the main thing, the main hurdle? Maybe. Let's take that example I was talking about with the detective and the Cthulhu crap. The Cthulhu crap goes in chapter 1, and then we purposely don't talk about Cthulhu crap for as long as we can hold off, so that by the time we get to it, the reader has forgotten as much as possible about it, so that when it resurfaces, that's when they get the big rush of endorphins and that chill down their spine, and they go, oh! So, in that case, yes, we got to it immediately, and no, we didn't, because we didn't tell the reader that that's what this is about. The main character didn't know until the last possible moment when it becomes real. I don't know. I mean, it's certainly something to try, but I don't know if I've got a strict rule on that. Go on.
When does a story have too many characters?
Ooh, when does a story have too many characters? That's a tough one. I mean, I think we've all read stories where we're just like, okay, I don't even know who this is. Stevens. What chapter was Steven from? And you're just, that's when you wish you're doing the audiobook version, because you're not going to get hung up on it. You're just like, oh, just along for the ride. I hope I remember. That's tough. That's definitely going to be one of those cases where you're going to want friends and beta readers in early in the process. And obviously, I always promote, hey, editor, get a developmental editor, and they'll find stuff like this. But that's going to be like such a fundamental error that's going to be really hard to fix. If you've got 20 characters, and then you're like, here, editor, what do I need to change? And they're like, throw the whole thing away and start over. I mean, you can. My latest book, when I handed it to my editor, he literally told me to rewrite the book. And ow, that hurt. But he knew that I was going to do it, that I wouldn't just be like, well, I'm not paying you for that. He told me to rewrite the book. And if you write in too many characters, that may be the only fix. I mean, it is really hard to get rid of too many characters. I like to have one main character, and then one almost main character, a very, very, very tight circle of best friends, you know, like 2 or 3 around them. So you've got one main character, maybe his girlfriend, and then their friends. So now we're talking like 5 central characters there, and then a bad guy, you know. And then as we're getting farther and farther away from the main character, we're going to have more and more minor characters where, yeah, this character may have a name, but we don't really know anything about them. It's not going to count against me that, you know, Jim turned on the light. I don't know what Jim is like, you know, but I know that he turned the light on. You know? So that's a tough one, but definitely you want to figure it out early. When in doubt, go with too few characters. It seems to be easier to add characters than it does to take them away. I've combined characters, I've split characters, but it's easier to start with as few as you can and then add more in rewrites, not edits, rewrites, to flesh things out when you realize that you've gone too tight. Other questions? Yes?
So I'm not sure if you've covered this yet, but often when coming up with a story, you have like the beginning, the end, the conflict, like completely thought out already. But then how do you come up with the action in between?
You might, but I don't. I'm half the world is outline, and half the world are pantsers, and I'm a pantser. So I have no freaking clue what my book is about when I start writing. All right? I know that like I know you're an outliner, so that's like blowing. How would you do that? I literally make up a character, and then I just toss them in a setting, and then I let them wander around, like, what's going on over here? What's going on over here? And because I'm not afraid of throwing that away. And the story finds itself somehow. I don't know where it came from. I swear I didn't do it, but there it is on the paper. And so I start with a very, very meandering plot of, I don't know, this character is into some problems and things are going wrong for him, and I don't know where this is going. And I kind of like try to draw a straight line from, oh, it must be going up here. No, and then it turns down. No, it must be going down. No, it's not going down there, you know. And eventually, I get within arm's reach of the ending, and I'm like, oh, that's where the end of the story is. And then I put it on the right side of the screen. I open up a blank document, and I rewrite the whole thing. And I take out all these little extra bits, and I straighten that story out. I add in the bits I need to foreshadow what's going to come. I strengthen the good bits. I clip out the weak bits. But I'm not an outliner. Outliners are going to give you a very, very, very different answer for that. And I'm guessing from your question that you're an outliner.
Yep.
So this is probably an incredibly mysterious glimpse into how could you possibly write a story like that?
Yeah, I had no idea that was the way to do it.
It's different things for different people. Everybody writes differently, and that's great, you know. Whatever works for you, the big thing is that no matter how you got that first draft, the rewriting process, the editing is where you turn that piece of shit draft into, because all of our first drafts suck. They all suck. That's why they call them first drafts. The rewriting, the editing process is where we turn a shitty draft into a good story. And it's a painful process. You know, we get all the way to the end of our draft, and we're like, woo, I wrote a book! and then realize, well, we've done this much, and this is how much we got to do before it's published. So, yes.
Are you ever going through and creating the story, and you're sort of trying to find the middle and the end, and you realize you've hit a dead end, and you just sort of pull it back?
And then you're like, what do I do with this? Yeah. Sometimes, I mean, 'cause like I said, you know, I don't know where the story is going. Sometimes it peters out, and you're like, I don't know. You set it off to the side. Maybe you come back to it. Maybe you don't. I'm not afraid to have a lot of stories going at once. I just don't know which one's going to take off. You know, I may wake up tomorrow and have oh my God, if I just did this and this one, and then that's going to be the next book. But you don't know until until you've actually got a whole first draft. It's hard to guess which one is going to be the one that I'm excited about. And when you're excited, that's the only thing that's going to make a good story. We are really getting close to time. Any short questions? 4 minutes left. Short questions. Now, in the back.
Do you have any process or practice that you use to get into a writing mindset before you actually sit down and write?
I do have one thing that I like to do. So when I am going to write a scene, I would love to know if other people do this. So I know that when I next sit down, I'm going to write the scene. It's going to be character A and character B having this conversation while they're fixing object C, or whatever it is. I've got some sort of thing that I've imagined, but I've only got this vague notion of it. And I will lay down and I'll daydream it out, I'll be like, oh, and then he says this, and then she says this, and then he says this. And I imagine the whole scene start to finish. And then I do it again, that night I lay down on my bed and my brain is going, and then he says this, and then she says this, and he picks up the wrench. Oh yeah, that's it, because then she says this that's about wrenches or whatever, And I just do it over and over and over again until I feel that scene, and I'm just like I've already dictated, I'm just transcribing what was already there. That's what I do. I don't know if that's other people do that too. I love that. That's like one of my favorite parts of the writing process, is that I get to enjoy the scene over and over again, and in different ways, turning things around in my mind. Well, what if it was, what if we started here? Or what if this happened? I really want him to say something about this. So what could she say that would cause him to say that, And I love that, just playing with it over and over again until it actually comes out on paper. So I don't know if that's a ritual, but that's certainly one that I like to do. 2 minutes left. Anybody? Make it quick.
You got any advice for character design, making your character, your races, species diverse?
That doesn't sound like a 2-minute question.
Okay.
my wife is an illustrator, and I won't lie, I lean on her hard. I'm just like, please. So this is kind of a weird aside, I've got aphantasia. People know about aphantasia. It's where you can't visualize things. And people go, well, how can you possibly write when you can't visualize? Actually, it works out pretty well. So all of my memories are encoded as words. I think, oh yeah, this thing happened, and he said this, and she said this. And when I imagine scenes, I'm imagining the words. So I have a very hard time imagining what anything looks like. And I'll find that I don't describe stuff nearly enough because I don't think in images like some people do. And I have, my editor kicked me like, hey, can I know what this guy looks like? I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot to do that. Oh, I didn't say what color her fur is. She's such an important character, and I never mentioned yet. So it happens. So I don't have good advice on that. Regardless, I am in the dealer's room. Would love for you to come by and talk more about writing, and would love for you to buy books. Because that's what keeps me coming here to these cons. Thank you so much. fuck. I adulted.
I don't know how anybody enjoys. Ugh. Ugh.
Does the tequila help? What brand?
It's just, you know, the 1800 coconut. It's terrible, cheap, garbage stuff, and I still love it. It's garbage. I love my garbage.